Okay, good evening, everyone. So welcome to Modern Marketing class. The purpose of today's lecture and discussion is about chapter 3, collecting information and forecasting demand. So I think the best way, because I made a little bit changes about the structure, or in case some students need to know exactly where I'm going to post it, right, under the Canvas website. So you're going to see right now we began to move into module 2 on capturing marketing insight. So we have two chapters, chapter 3 and chapter 4. So in terms of planning, I would say chapter 3 relatively is easy chapter to understand, but chapter 4 take a lot of time to understand and also be able to practice very well. So but it's very useful because some of you, I think if you are undergraduate students in marketing major, many of you take a marketing research class. And I would say that when you are taking the class, you maybe hate the class because it's very comprehensive, logical, sometimes based on the practical driven. But it's very useful because many students didn't see the value until they began to get an interview for some especially high-end job. The same logic can apply to the graduate level. So I think the big difference between undergraduate and graduate level will be graduate level students understand the benefit. So they are more clear what they are looking for, more motivated. Another example I just mentioned. So lately, many students began to choose marketing research as a career, even though some of them, they maybe hate this chapter class before. Because the benefit, right? You see the benefit both for personal growth training and for career training too. So you'll see some examples later. So the big difference between chapter 3 and chapter 4 is that chapter 3 is more focused on collecting information and the big picture. Marketing research cover both broad level, mostly in detail level, because later means marketing research is about the doing, right? Of course, doing was influenced by the thinking as well. If you can think very well, and you know how to do it effectively, but that's much more things, nuances during the process for marketing research chapter. And once again, I think I think one student asked me about structure. So you will notice that under each module, I began to add this heading here called reminder about a key graded assignment around the end of each module online. And then that's just most important thing I put here. I think this heading will help you to stay on track in some sense, if I can help, right? Because the important things can put it together. Used to be I put under each chapter based on the timing. Now I realize because the students' studying habit, I think they prefer group things based on the similarity of features. So this reason I decided to put all this graded assignment as reminder here. Of course, right, as Canvas design feature, everything else in detail will be able to find on the assignment, discussion, or quizzes. But here, just for your convenience reason, but if you click the link, they are going to direct you to the same assignment. But this help you to see in a linear fashion where they can find them. That's one reason and purpose. Second purpose, I think most of us in some way help you to become productive. Because for example, under each module, I list something you're not only just doing a reading, because if I don't have anything for grading, in some sense keep you busy. You maybe feel suddenly, you forgot to log in for 1 week because you don't feel something upcoming. So if I have something at the end of each module, you may feel, okay, I have to do something. Then you begin to do the planning, allocate your time, go back to read something to prepare each assignment. I think this maybe help you in some way just based on design feature. So help us to get organized and stay on track. So that's the purpose to introduce you this structure on this module. And then last time sometimes I have to apologize. Last time I was planning to finish chapter 2, then go over the study guide on chapter 2. I guess because we were a little bit late last time, and then at the end of the chapter 2, I forgot to go back to go over the study guide. So, but overall, I'll give you this suggestion. Typically, the best learning way will be we cover something here, right? Cover something, then we take some practice question to test our knowledge, go through the circle. But because it's a graduate level class, and also we don't have many students online, so you guys can tell me which preference you want. Based on your schedule, based on your preference. Another thing I wanted to mention here. So, for example, at the end of this lecture, we can practice some questions to help understand, or we can come back later when we begin have some upcoming quizzes or exam. So that means I'll begin add some review session, in case we have some specific or important exam is upcoming. So that means we are going to go back to the study guide again. This just as a reminder. The last thing I wanted to mention is in the study guide. So once again, the reason I give you a study guide, because they tend to be more difficult or complex or needed to be understood very well. So therefore, I include them. It does not mean just pay attention for effectiveness reason. It does not mean all the questions will assessed during the exam or quizzes will be at the same level. Otherwise, can be very redundant, right? So therefore, study guide questions tend to be at, if you see it from 1 to 3, the difficult level, this study guide tend to be at least 2 to 3 level. In the actual assessment assignment or quizzes, we have some basic ones. In one important reason, very similar to we are going to discuss later chapter called customer segmentation. Because I'm teaching a large class, so I have to have multiple purpose goals. The majority will be make sure most students has a very good foundation, right? Because if you don't have solid foundation, you learn some important things, but you are not stable, reliable at the base. So this reason I want to make sure I cover some basic ones and also some advanced ones has a very good combination. But make sure most students can able to have good foundation pass class. And then we cover something as example, most during the discussion in each chapter, cover something more current as application or criticize the chapter's information or just give you more complex example. So I hope you can understand it, because that's my thought. It maybe help you to cater to different students level, different preference for different reasons. Yeah, especially MBA level, we have many students, they have many years of working experience as well already, but they are in different discipline. So I need you to participate, communicate, the way we can get more out of this class. Okay, so that's the idea from here. So now we go back to chapter 3. So once again, pay attention, because this is a graduate level, I don't try to go over too many basic ones, just briefly go over the structure, some key point. I call this as level 1. Level 1 means you have foundation, what they are, right? I will quickly move into the level 2, which will be why and how, those kind of 5W, 1H, right? The level 1 most is what they are. And then we move quickly into the application evaluation stage, which will be address the why and how can you implement, how can you think differently, etc. So for example, this learning objectives cover those level 1, what they are, and then you can see it begin to, they are structured the similar thing. The first four they are see what they are, right? The fifth, they began to move into how can company actually measure and forecast demand. So that's a similar structure as I mentioned before. Okay. So so once again, if you are new to marketing discipline, the first impressions many students they have will be, we have so many different terms, right, terminology. So one reason is that because we want to be precise or effective about the communication. So that's a very common pattern. We will see more term. The good news, as I mentioned before, always trying to recall some knowledge base you have before. You see the similarity. It also help you to understand better, because once you have some comparison, it's easy for us to see the be efficient to process information. And then, because we are doing a comparison as habit, we'll be able to articulate, see the difference, exactly where they are similar or where they are different. So I want to show you more examples. So for example, this actually, if you use one example as a comparison, is very similar to this computer information system or management information system. Especially management information system, the acronym is MIS. Here the very same, right? But we call it as modern marketing information system. So essentially, very simple, we understand just means we try to have all the information, and then how can we use some kind of equipment, software, process, human capital to design, coordinate those things, and then be able to take most out of it. It means you have these three key components in the MIS system, and then next one you begin to think about how can you coordinate, right? And based on your resources and priority to decide, make it feasible. So I think I use another example to set as a possible example for this whole chapter. So one issue so far for even in the past decades, we know it's a good thing you have information system, you have those advanced software, human capital in the IT field, computer science field. The problem is many small business, right? They don't have such resources, right? Because it costs more money, the other things, right? So what the takeaway message for us, right, as a small business or even for personal matters. So this is my personal thought. Because nowadays the trend, just think about the IT field, the computer, laptop, become cheaper. That's called Moore's law. So more technology advancement, the price goes down, but they have more features. So therefore, there's good news for small business owners because those information systems become less costly, become more user-friendly, it's become more customized and personalizable. So this reason, for small business owner, we began to move into that direction to help us to capture on this information system, both the technology advancement and also at lower cost, right, and higher accurate effectiveness level. So we will give you some examples later, but this whole picture, that's my personal thought. So for example, if you are studying entrepreneurship, you're doing investment, so you maybe wonder what's the direction you should go. So my personal thought will be the current trend is going to be beneficial for small business owner. So I think I use a very simple example. If you pay attention to this payment system, used to be, people had only accepted cash, right? Nowadays, you can see some small business owner like a dance studio, they have some small store. You can do the checking system, the banking system through your cell phone, right? No, I think this year they are very common. We use this called Zelle. Even Facebook, they can allow you to pay. Used to be PayPal, right? So that's a very good example. Become very convenient and low cost, almost very competitive compared with the bigger banking system before. So that's the kind of one current example to show the trend. And then we introduce this one of the key components, which is the internal records. So internal record, one thing, as I mentioned before, when we talk about the 4 Ps before, and also SWOT analysis. So we have to make sure exactly what does the internal mean. So once again, you think about internal means you are the center here. Anything belongs to you, or you have a control over it, you have ownership. We classify them as the internal thing. And you just add object such as internal. We talk about the strengths and the weakness, and external related to opportunity and threat. We talk about the last chapter 2. And then here, internal just release records, right? You can see some example will be sales price, cost, inventory levels, other things. So that's the way you think. But of course, the next level will be you have to justify how much effort you are going to put this collect such information. How can you take advantage of implement it later? So we'll discuss later. But the one big trend so far as a quick judgment will be, if you wanted to be better at processing information at competition, you want to use your record. One way will be make them digitized because it's easier to process information, more like data, get all the data prepared. So this, I think I mentioned an example before. They ask you to, they convince you to do shopping online or use a credit card, not a cash, or because this hard copy will take some extra effort, right, to convert into a Excel files for database. So that's one of the incentive. Another example for the cost, right? They try to reduce cost. I think Sam's Club, if you guys pay attention, Sam's Club began to, I think from last year to this year, they first introduced this self-checkout because self-checkout reduced their labor cost. Second thing, I think they began to introduce, they ask you to download the app. You can do the checkout on your cell phone as well. So in order to, for customers are willing to take this approach, many times we don't want to do this effort, right? Because they begin to pass on labor to customer in order to reduce cost. So customers sometimes say, I'm not willing to do it. So what they are going to do in order to make it easier for them to, we call it adoption process. They give you incentive. For example, if you use these apps instead of using their in-store humans checkout process, they give you $10 coupon or some kind of statement if you choose something, help them in this way. Partially reason because they are trying to convince you to reduce costs and also collecting more information as internal record based on their preferred method and cost. So that's another example, right? You should be able to find a lot of examples. The most important things, as I mentioned before, the first level we introduce you what they are. Next level, you began to easy way of thinking to put 2 or 3 things together to see it more like chemistry. If you put 2 or 3 things together to see how they are going to interact, right, and what will happen, because of course sometimes if the interaction will be worse, right, sometimes the interaction will be better. So that's the way, simplified way I think as a studying habit, learning habit, right. So then we move on to the next component. Marketing intelligence. So once again, it's come from definition. To me, mostly just means you just think into a process level. I think similar to our students have this quote, right, about goal orientation, goal result driven versus process oriented. So the definition mostly come from this process perspective. Mostly you guys can tell they focus on procedure. A resource you wanted to use to collect information to take advantage of it. So this is a very broad definition. If you wanted to see some different definition or recent ones, I think mostly they are trying to going to revise as a recent trend will be artificial intelligence, like automation process, because that's the way to help you to reduce cost and also be really fast, to process information. I will come back to give more current examples later. Now we'll finish some key components. This actually began to move into the application stage. Then a very natural question will be, how can we improve, right, the marketing intelligence? This is some example. I think I'm going to use one or 2 examples to illustrate how they are going to affect your thinking and doing. So I will use the first one here. They could motivate the sales force to report a new development. I maybe ask the students, can you please just give more details here regarding this first example. How can motivate the sales force to report a new development can be part of the approach to improve marketing intelligence? Yeah. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, we have 10 students participate here. So I'm asking you to, in some way, kind of ask you to make sense based on this example and give more examples or details. This first, or either you can use the second one. Okay. So if not, let me give example. So it's come from management literature mostly. If you want to use some theory guide you. So one reason is that if you just based on, for instance, if you don't have some incentive system, the sales force is less likely to report to you. But of course, if you take one step back, so why do we want to motivate the sales force? But once again, if I'm going to draw a picture, right, you think about the position level, it's help us to understand. It's very efficient to think in the structural level, position level. Because this is the manufacturer, this is the middleman, right? I maybe use manufacturer here, middleman. Yeah, this is the sales force. Oftentimes, sales force has direct contact with customer, right? So you think about it, even for, you guys know, right? If you are the manager as middleman here, you are the sales force. Who has the first-hand information, right? Of course, the person who are close to the customer. But the problem is if your manager at the middle level doesn't give you enough incentive to encourage you to collect information, pay attention to customers' complaints, feedback, you don't have incentive to collect information, not to mention to report back to the middleman. The middleman has no incentive to go back to report to the manufacturer to improve the product. So that's a very simple logic to mention. But the reason I mentioned, if you think this kind of structure way, it helps us to articulate very well. So of course now, if then we move on to they mentioned the solution, right? So therefore, sometimes they began to find some approach. For example, if you provide a feedback by the salesperson, they have some incentive system to encourage you to do so. Of course, if you want to be a little more detailed, this really pay attention. You have to be very detail oriented in order to do things much better, because a lot of small things can make a big difference. I think let me finish this example. I use an example from Amazon later. So for example, of course, this is just a very simple illustration, but you understand, in a working environment, oftentimes there are several salesperson. So you also think horizontally, salesperson 1, salesperson 2, salesperson 3. You have colleague relations, right? Sometimes they treat colleagues as competitors. Sometimes they are collaborators. But you have to also be able to have some design system from managerial level or strategic level to encourage people to compete and collaborate in a healthy manner. Right? You guys know sometimes the policy can make things worse because policy encourages very self-interest behavior. But if you encourage them to collaborate, and they are more likely to work with you and working with customer, and the feedback, think about it this way, the feedback come back to the middle manager, to the manufacturer, will be much better. Because sometimes, if you only have incentive system, but you don't pay attention about the quality, you know what happened, right? They keep you sending you back to a lot of report because your criteria is just based on the quantity, not based on quality. So what happens, the manager will feel very frustrated to process your report and then give you incentive to reward you later. I'll give you a very negative example. You guys pay attention. I figured out the call center. Oftentimes, this call center, they trying to apply this principle, but they don't understand it very well. What I'm saying are based on my personal experience and observation. So oftentimes, you probably experience as well. They keep calling you, they answer your phone calls, but they don't pay attention to quality. You know why? I figured out because their incentive system will be, they count the numbers of phone calls they made to the customer, and they don't care about the quality, they don't care about how long they speak to you, because it's a design system from the policy level. They base on the numbers, how many times, and they have some like a book tracking device, very simple book tracking device. They can count the numbers based on the computer record, but because they don't monitor the process, they don't monitor the quality. So therefore, oftentimes the salesperson only for the purpose of incentive for the rewarding system, they keep calling customer, but they have no intention, no ability, no motivation to serve you better. Okay, that's a very simple example, but you all see a lot of examples, especially at this low end, or very not a very famous, very high brand level companies. I think last time I gave you guys one example from Sam's Club, and I was thinking they are going to improve. I was quite surprised because I have one question about my transaction. They made a mistake about my cash out amount. They hold on for a few days. I was calling them because I wanted to explain to them before it's too late. And what happens, I was calling them, they keep, they do a called cross selling. They keep showing me, selling me something, which is common, but mostly I want to get my problem solved. I was quite surprised actually. How they asked me to wait for more than 15 minutes. And during these 15 minutes, they keep sending me all the promotions. Literally means I was calling there. It's worse than even watching TV because when you're watching TV, you can switch channels, right? So while I was calling there, I was hoping, waiting attentively to hope someone is going to answer my phone. I don't want to miss the phone call because it takes more time to call back again, go through this automation system and talking to a real person. I was quite surprised that they later asked me to wait for 15 minutes. And during this 15 minutes, I would listen to 15 minutes commercials. So just give you these examples. And another example I just mentioned, why does it matter? Very simple example to illustrate. I read one news from online comments. They said Amazon is studying, Amazon paying someone to study, just basically means to try to improve the efficiency. Another person mentioned a very simple concept. Of course, it's a big difference. This is what's the big difference now? What's the big deal? You try to improve the efficiency from 1% to 2%. Amazon's answer and some customer online they mentioned, of course, you think about it, right. If you are running a small business from 1% to 2%, it's not a big deal. If you are running a business like the size like Amazon, efficiency improvement from 1% to 2% is a huge, right? Especially if you consider the relative improvement from 2% to 1% and divided by 1%, right? That's improvements, that's a lot, right? It's almost 100% here. It's not about the absolute difference. It's based on the relevant improvement. So because once again, I think chapter 2 we discussed before, 2 key terms, right? One effectiveness, one called efficiency. So far we are talking about this as efficiency example. Improvement from 1% to 2% at this relative level, 100% efficient level, is a huge deal, right? We cannot look down at this. Of course, here as example, they can imply both efficiency and effectiveness. Especially if you think about it internally and externally competition, internally improvement. So what happens if you don't pay attention, don't have such a incentive system, the other competitors are doing better than you. Sooner or later, they are going to introduce some better product service to the customer, and you'll be running out of business because of the competition. Okay, so that's one simple illustration that I show you as a vertical level and also horizontal level. And actually, I'm doing research with one professor from Kennesaw and also Southern Illinois University. We are studying this salesperson collaboration because that's one issue. I just briefly give ideas. What happens sometimes, the good salesperson, they can, when they decide to leave the firm, they can take away the customer as well. So we are studying this pattern, benefit or cons. If you should hire, you should train your own sales force. You should hire some third party as a sales force. So just to give you some simple example, you can tell if you want to apply. You'll find a lot of examples, details to be able to apply into your business setting, right? I use another example here, like a motivated intermediates to pass along intelligence. Actually, this example comes from the frontline employee. Now this actually began to move on to the middleman. So the same logic, right? We need to find an incentive to let people to do things good for your business. So the same logic here. but you can just think about it etymologically, the pros and the cons, what's the most effective, efficient way for them to do it. And of course, right, if you wanted to make things more realistic and complex, you can think about the middleman has horizontally, several people are competing, we call it buyer-supply relationship, because I know some students, they are in the buyer middleman position. This is going to sound familiar to you. Another example, I just listened to a webinar yesterday from Journal of Marketing. They published one article. So oftentimes in the middleman process, especially for government funding, oftentimes they are not open for competition. For example, if you are applying for some funding sponsorship, they don't open for competition because you have to write a proposal to compete. So that means a huge barrier will be information asymmetry. It sounds familiar from econs field. So because they don't try to make the information available to everyone, that means it causes intentionally information asymmetry. So of course, if you have less information accessibility, you are at a disadvantaged situation. So they actually study in this B2B setting how those people who are on the disadvantaged side overcome the barrier to be able to compete. They use a theory called this signal theory. It's very funny, actually very common sense like humans behavior. Because you wanted to compete, so oftentimes they have different signal strategy. You either signal strategy telling people you are better off than other people because you are more competent. Another strategy will be based on your relationship. You will tell people you are more, it's easy to get it done, you are more reliable. So that kind of, they apply these two theories to explain which one is better, which one is worse, and when. But I want to just share with you ideas with some actual examples in implications here. Okay, let me see if I have something more important here to mention. This one can be interesting. I'll briefly mention here. Now you'll be quite surprised. They call it customer advisory panel. What happens, think about this way, this textbook has been published for so many years, so many editions. In terms of application, it's quite surprising you'll be able to tell. Because most people understand this customer advisory panel here in terms of hierarchy level, mostly at this basic level, lower level. Basic means you have some salesperson, as we mentioned here before. You organize some meeting customer, you ask them, you form as a panel at this level, customer level. But right, in an organization, we have a middle level, just briefly, right? You have a CEO level, board level. It's a very interesting study and observation. Really, that's quite interesting. If you pay attention, it's going to help you to become better thinker and doer. So what happens, most of people, they apply and understand this from textbook at this level, maybe occasionally go through this middle level as customer, the panel. But really, they introduce customer to the CEO and board level meeting level. You got to follow me here, right? But until recently, they did some study by some professors and also by some company. Less than 1/3, they said, they introduce customer to this high level in their board level meeting. And they began a study, they also collect data to verify they brought more benefit or cons. Because think about this way, sometimes customer can cause more distraction at this CEO level meeting than the benefit. So they actually study, the overall result will be is a benefit. But it's very, very, very small observation, the funny thing, right? Because we really, in terms of application in the industry level, we introduce customer, include them at the CEO or board level for meeting for feedback purpose, right? But in practice, now they began to study as a systematic manner, and they realized actually we should change our thinking. We should introduce customer level to very high level for this. I think that's another explanation, right? Otherwise, you think that everyone say, okay, we cannot learn too much things. But the good news will be oftentimes you just think about this mathematically, how many possible combinations, and also you think structurally, and you begin against reality to see which has been applied and how about the outcome, which one we didn't. And you kind of get a lot of ideas to from thinking perspective, and also to against reality as practice to see possible approaches to test new ideas for business practice. Okay, so this is another thing here. This one I think is a very simple example based on cultural country level. For example, United States tend to be very open. You have a lot of information. The government has census data website to share with the general public. But some other countries, they are very restricted. They don't share a lot of information. And even if you are part of a citizen there, you have to have some very high-level government official in order to be able to have access to such information. So what's the implication for this, right? That means if you have two options in two countries as options, of course you want to choose the best for you. For example, if the one country is open to everyone, if they are open to everyone, this means you don't have a specific advantage over another one. However, in a restricted country, if you are in a position to have advantage access, you should choose that one, because that's good for your business, right? Even though it's unfair to others. Okay, so that's one other way to illustrate here. I think I also want to mention here to some students, some of them, they don't think it really don't force you. It's still very good and beneficial if you schedule allows to come to class session, because I think for different reasons. I still prefer this way. If you schedule allow, it helps you understand much better, especially when you have questions or discussion. You can participate very directly. But if you wait until we post the recorded video later, so it's always your mindset was kind of in a passive pattern, plus you lose opportunity to ask for questions, for clarification, to share your thought. So the reason I'm saying I'm practicing this way, but when I was a child, I like to ask questions, but I didn't think clearly. Now I realize there's some scientific reason, because oftentimes if you intentionally engage your mind, your physical body, even your muscle, of course, this reason I mentioned, not everything you are saying is worth any something, right? But sometimes accumulatedly, something will become useful, insightful, right? But you never know. This reason sometimes good habit to put into writing, to take notes. You come back later, you do this reflection, integration, and something will come out really nicely. Now, maybe just mention some example. I don't want to sound like bragging. A lot of my publication ideas, half done, good ideas actually literally just come from when I wake up in the dreaming, or I just go to another event. I just draw some connections. I don't know exactly what set of connections, how strong they are. I just feel something that I take notes, and then later I began to do a little more deep thinking search, and then things become better and better. You will be quite surprised, more like a building block. Something can be so connected. It's more like a combination, as I discussed in chapter like art and science. I recently worked on one paper. I have been working on for many years. I literally feel very excited because so many things feel so disconnected by different disciplines, hard science, social science. I began to think a little bit sometime. I keep reading, thinking, and I feel I began to put things all together very nicely and very elegantly. So you'll find more example from your personal experience. The important thing is you have to learn how the brain, the muscle, physical, mind work together. So I think that's help you understand yourself, help you understand the process better. Okay, then we move on to the next few ones. This is actually very simple because of this internet age and digital data we have so far. Of course, now the most important things will be how can we apply and compete. So the one simple concept they actually mentioned here so far, not only for customer, even for marketing, for process information, we began to move into the real time. But you guys know real time has pros and cons. Real time basically means is 24/7. You serve customer. I think I use the class teaching, because we have emails, we have Zoom. But I do learn for balance reason, right? I don't check a reply email the time I receive it, because you know why? The human brain doesn't work this way. Because if I began to answer one question the time I receive it, each email content, you don't know the direction. We actually better at group things together, process things together. So therefore, what I do will be I check an email 3 times or 4 times a day, unless some days I anticipate some important things. I check more often. Otherwise, simple logic will be I am going to increase my frequency, but we are not a machine, right? We are humans. You increase frequency, you increase the workload, and also your energy level will be decreased after you use after the energy for some other important task. So when we are handling this, we're going to ask you guys as collaboration for yourself too. You set up certain time to do important things, energy better. Small time, do some small things, don't need too much energy, concentration. But you have to learn how to manage yourself, right? Of course, you also try to communicate with others to help them to have good habits. Will become very collectively productive. But the reason go back to here, of course, now if you are doing business now, you don't have too many options. The answer actually is yes, you still have options. The answer will be artificial intelligence. By this reason, they are related to here because artificial intelligence, they are tended to be good at doing this obviously like a tedious repeated work. They are very reliable and they don't feel bored, right? And then you as human, you release yourself to do something more beneficial to you as combination. So that's the trend for this. But of course, there's pros and cons. As I mentioned last time, example, a lot of companies began to misuse such artificial intelligence call center automation system because it's very hard for us to reach a real person to answer some questions the machine cannot answer anymore. And plus, the machine sometimes just you cannot. Yeah, of course, they cannot solve all the issues. Secondly, I think that's just the comments will be they are improving, but some company began to heavily rely on this in order to reduce the cost, but they are sacrificing the customer satisfaction and the perception of quality as well. But I'm hoping they can improve, as I just mentioned some example from Sam's Club and also the Spectrum from the internet service. Okay, the next one, yeah, is more, well, we more into still about the application. So 2 things you can tell of course, first one on communication. So most of business experience, I think we are very good at this, right? But it still takes some effort to communicate. This reason you can see the commercials oftentimes based on different stage. As I mentioned before, the AID model, right? If you based on consumers' knowledge level AIDA, there's some scientific reason for this. Early stage, if you focus on attention, they tend to focus on the brand name, the one unique benefit, etc. They don't mention too much details. They advertise 3 times in one commercial because you are matching this stage from customer perspective. Then later, when customer began to move into the intention level, they began to change the commercial with more details and more because they are supposed to matching the customer's interest level because we are more looking for the additional benefits and the cost comparison the price level. But the price level oftentimes they don't mention too much at the interest level. They mention oftentimes at the desire stage. And then action stage, they began to introduce competition from competitors because they are asking, they know they are matching your consideration set during this decision process. Because by the time you decide to buy something, you narrow down to 2 or 3 choices, and they are trying to tell you to buy from them over their competitors. So this kind of a very short illustration about this communication promotion model, ARTE model. Okay, but the only difference here, because we still apply traditional theories into this marketing intelligence context. So that most oftentimes it works very well. Of course, intelligence context has some of their new unique features, so you want to modify based on needs. So that's one information from here. So one thing very common, it's not very surprising to most of the classmates. As an example, one big difference between social media and the traditional commercial method, because it's word of mouth. If you post something on Facebook, they spread out really fast, right? Just one click of a mouse, or maybe less than 1 second. So therefore, the influence and the speed is much faster than before, right? But of course, there's some control issue too, because this exactly is the topic about the fake news, right? We don't know the source, the reliability. So that's a different topic, just one way to illustrate here. Then we are going to move into this macro environmental factors. So any questions before we continue this new subtopic? Okay. Yeah, this is slide first about the some terms, right? It's very easy. Just wanted to the purpose just understand difference. The Fed, the trend, mega trend. So it's I think just Fed just means something not a very predictable, very short period. The trend a little bit longer. Mega trend is a bigger. It goes slow to form, but it takes longer to disappear, right? It takes longer to form, but also takes longer to be replaced by a different trend. I think the one simple explanation from the examples, they mentioned that in the fashion design field, they mentioned that something become more fashion this season simply because they repeat the cycle from 20 years ago. For example, 20 years ago they take out their grandmother's clothes, right? They wear on the street, and suddenly they become very very popular. So they are in the United States, they are discussing apply to the Fed things. But if you really pay attention to details, it's not exactly the same thing, because the color is maybe look similar, but like oftentimes those fashion field, Fed is very short. Mostly they are gradually follow this trend, because the color, design, the fabric material has a lot of things to deal with macro environmental factors, right? So for example, recently, I would say one mega trend will be about this green marketing, right? Environmental protection awareness. So that's can be another one example for this mega trend, not only from the developing country and also from developing countries. Because typically developing countries, they have resources issue, they are more careful. But recently, because it's global citizen awareness, so the mega trend began to carry on into almost at a global level. I think that's one example to illustrate. The next one we are going to introduce and discuss those major forces. So this is actually very similar to undergrad level we discussed, introduced before, those big factors. But the most important things, once again, we are going to just quickly jump into the application level. So one way I highlight here is to help you as a trainer, because it's very easy to understand if we talk about one thing at one time. But oftentimes things will become interesting, complex when you begin to introduce two things together. Okay, if for some reason this one doesn't move this time, I don't know what happened. Let me double check. Okay, make sure it's this one doesn't move anymore. Okay, I maybe try different. Okay, come back here. So it worries me because sometimes it doesn't move. I was concerned our lecture is not recorded and we have to restart again. So okay, the simple logic will be, so because graduate level is very good habit. Just think about mathematically, like the kids you are playing game. We give you 6 toys here. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You become familiar with each one, right? And then you began to put 2 toys together to imagine in terms of the logical sense or in practical sense, in relative sense, what will happen is good for you or better for you. So I will use some examples quickly after we introduce one at a time first. So demographic information is common, right? We don't have to mention. But I'm going to combine this next one to show some examples. Now, for example, we introduce you demographic environment factors regarding this education group, household pattern, age, and the population growth. And then we have this economic environment. So for example, we mentioned this consumer psychology, income distribution, income saving. So pay attention. Now I'm going to show you as one way to help you think, understand, apply as a thinking learning habit. So I literally just combine these 2 things to apply into a service section sector. So you guys pay attention. This is just based on my thinking and observation as well as evidence to verify my guess. So the nowadays, if you pay attention, because we began to move a lot of things to digital, to e-commerce. So therefore, but if you pay attention to our current present slogan and the calls, right? They are asking, they keep more jobs in the United States, not go to other countries. But if you just think about it logically, you probably have some experience if you just even talk to local people, especially small business owners. And I talk to people when I go outside, go to gym, restaurant, and they just mention their reality. So when China and the United States have this, tax rate fire, the trade war, even from last year, 2 years ago, quickly the local, especially construction field, they realized a quick difference. First of all, because because the government began to control the import, and then the price from the internal domestic began to increase very significantly, very quickly, very high. That's one reason. And the second is come from material, right, raw material or products. And second thing, realized because they try to encourage people high from domestic level and have less outsourcing from China to India, other Asian country. And then the local business quickly realized that we have a shortage of skill set of employees. And that's mean, but the financing news oftentimes mention that, okay, we don't have enough jobs. Actually, because public news sometimes they are controlled by political reason, right? So because news can influence people's ideology, the mindset. So they're not honest to tell you all the truth. So the reality is that they actually have jobs, but the problem is either two people don't want to take those jobs for just kind of attitude reason, social status concern, or some jobs they just cannot do it because they have a job, but they don't have all the skills to do the work. So this is actually one example combined with this demographic and economic and political, simple example. Another one I wanted to show you, really think you can use this as potential research topic if you want. This is kind of a little bit complex to explain. The idea is this, from this network ecological perspective. Think about this way. I think use a good example. If you are location in the Raleigh area compared with in Georgia area, in a small city, Raleigh area tend to have good like a school system, good the employee, very educated population group, good working ethic. I just use this one. I don't want to try to make just use something make it more concrete, right? It does not mean I'm trying to be offended to some other people. But if you compare another city who has a higher crime issue, less qualified people, less job opportunity, especially high end, not a very advanced school system, especially at the graduate level. Because the ideas introduce you this ecosystem. So what happens now? People didn't pay attention. And actually, this is my thinking here. Because if you want to, the employees are partially they are consumers, they are also employees. So my thought will be if you consider, for instance, one company location in Raleigh, another one in a lot less developed area, even though they are both in the United States, they provide a service both in physical store and online. So my logic, like more like a hypothesis here, use the overall satisfaction level will be still higher in the I would say more developed physical areas. So my explanation is this, right? Because physical store oftentimes they still have to hire people from locals. So that means now locals, if locals people has less qualified people available, has a crime issue, the more advanced, more capable, mobility, right? If you have higher mobility and they have a safety concern, crime concern, their kids' education concern, people have a tendency to move close to more developed areas because the feathers alike go together, similar kind of ideology. This actually in some way affect you as customer as the service quality. So, concrete level means, if you have options to choose, get your answers, problem solved, you have two options, right, in both locations, as example here. One go to physical store, one go to online. And my prediction will be this way. If there are more developed areas, because this ecosystem perspective, there's no big difference between online service and the physical store service. But if you are contacting people from less developed area, the difference between online service and the physical store service is higher. The gap is higher. That's my explanation. Of course, now you guys can use more data or your personal business experience to test. One biggest reason I feel this way, because humans need to survive. But if you, basically that humans as a whole species, we have two rules. We try to survive, reproduce of our own species. But at the same time, we try to avoid those risks, right? For example, crime issue is too high. I'm not going to buy my house over a dangerous area, right? So tendency will be everyone was thinking this way, unless you have some government regulation policy to incentivize people to overcome those concerns to stay there. Otherwise, everyone try to go to a better place. So what happens? They have better place, then they have better ability to serve the customer. So therefore, the difference between physical store service quality and online service quality is smaller. However, if you are service people at less developed areas, then online, because online you don't have this physical constraints, you can hire qualified people anywhere because there's no physical constraints. But for those in-store person, right, they can only hire people nearby. So therefore, you have less capable pools to choose from, and then the employee will be less likely capable or incentivized to serve people in a physical distance close to each other. I don't know if you can follow me here, right? Because this can be a very broad issue here. Because think about this way, if everyone thinks this way, I want to be in a better neighborhood for better opportunity for myself and for my young generation, then everyone going to try to go to those big, better areas. And less other people, it's more a competition, right? And other people don't have this ability to move to a better place. And then they began to indirectly affect the service quality to us as customer. But because we're not very happy, then they are not going to have very good business revenue income as employees. Okay, right. Yeah, this actually I think can be very good observation. It can be new things happening. I did actually began to test these ideas through my personal experience. When I get a chance, I began to test this thinking, to see if my guess is true, right? But of course, if you are CEO, it's going to be a big deal because you have to think about how it's going to affect you for a big business, right? So they can be important, even though I'm just discussing this as a personal observation level here. So any other thought, comments here? Okay. I want to mention one more thing here because this example, some students might prefer have some discussion about the ethical issue. So this is exactly, if the service quality is lower, and the human has a tendency, especially culturally regulation, if they made a mistake, they don't service very well, and then you are less likely to get a compensation for your time, for your loss, because the employee will have this ethical issue because they don't want to admit, because the culturally, right, the regulation. If you say that's my fault, then the customer is going to ask you to be responsible, liable for all the mistakes you are taking. So what happens, because they are not less likely, they have so much concern about the consequences of as a penalty, they just don't want to admit. So what happens is ethical, working ethic in the whole, at the individual level and at this company level will become worse over time. Okay, so I actually had some personal experience before. I don't want to mention the details. I'll give you very simple examples. You guys can pay attention. Nowadays, if you, because it's so common, we do business online, we subscribe our credit card information, we sign contract online. But oftentimes, you probably have some example, the frequency is much higher. Once you decide to terminate the relationship, business relationship, it makes it very difficult for you to exit, to quit. You get the idea, right? That's the business practice so far. How can you tell, right? In terms of frequency, especially those not a very famous company, not a very good brand, they do this business practice very often. And even makes things worse right now because it introduces artificial intelligence. You once again go back to this example, right? You don't get a chance to talk to a human. They use artificial intelligence. You know why exactly? No, because it costs them less, and they have no emotion to be involved if you are talking to a machine. But you are human, you have emotion involvement. So what happens, they know exactly what will happen based on percentage. They know that most of the customer will give up, just give up, pay you extra until you decide to let me go, and then we move on to the next business partner, business customer. So that's actually become a pattern right now, partially because of the interaction between political reason, demographic, and economic reason, partially because of ethical reason, and partially because the people take advantage of this artificial intelligence for business practice. Okay. I think that's mentioned as a very good combination to illustrate the three factors we discussed. And then we have this social, cultural, and natural environment. So these two things I want to combine together just to be efficient of our time. The natural environment actually is very easy to understand because a lot of resources like oil cannot be is not reversible. So therefore, especially at the country level, you guys can tell they are competing, but sometimes because of the political reason, ideology reason, they don't tell you the real purpose. They go to another country for competing for oil, for diamond, right? But they always, oftentimes, use some excuse. For example, in terms of liberal reason, democracy reason, or some other reasons. But fundamentally, if you kind of sort through all the excuses, right, oftentimes it's narrowed down to competition about this natural resources competition. Okay, think about this with Iraq, right? Middle East. Now we have a lot of discussion from culturally political reasons, but you have to think about this with the biggest reason they are very rich in oil, right? Those natural resources. Otherwise, why don't they go to some other countries? They have some similar issues, right? The big difference because it's bottom line, we are competing for those natural environment resources. So therefore, we need to be close to them. We have access to them. Of course, other countries are doing the same thing, just different, I think, coverage, right? They were hiding on the different issues, but the bottom line, they are competing for the natural resources, right? But of course, the percentage is different. Some countries are more, visible or direct. Some are more indirect, right? Then you go back to the social culture. Social culture actually is we have a lot of examples, so we don't have to spend too much time. But two things will be pay attention to the core cultural value based on each culture, and then second thing is subculture. So what the reason is that oftentimes when we began to apply, we have a tendency to simplify things. For example, we oftentimes see the Koreans, Japanese, the Chinese, the American. But if you guys pay attention, if you want to have a very good understanding and apply very well, under the subculture, even within the same race group, gender group, for instance, Southern and North is different. The way they share a lot of similarities now in other countries' culture. So the point I wanted to mention to pay attention to those subcultures it may be in some ways more important than understand the core cultural values. In some ways similar to the learning I'm introducing here. Core cultures help us have a very good foundation, the basic ones. If you want to be able to apply, understand better, you really have to pay attention to the subcultures, right? So for example, I use this working environment as an example. Oftentimes people get fired. It's not because they cannot do the job. Oftentimes just because the organizational culture, each culture different, and they cannot fit in very well. And often the kind of surviving strategy, right? If you don't have very good observation skill, ability to understand, you are not at a stage to be able to apply correctly, to be able to survive effectively, efficiently, right? So one big reason I notice this now because they don't pay attention to this subcultural differences. So therefore, they feel a little bit of tension in the working environment. They are there. But after a while, because of the conflicts, competition, things become worse. For some people be able to adapt very well. So that's I think another example. Maybe help you help us to be able to apply a little better at a small level, right? The last one here, I want to spend a little more time, but we are going to have tons of examples because we are talking about a technological environment. So I'll go through these things. I'll give you very simple, quick examples. So this one thing will be pace. So that means if you want to summarize or paraphrase, this means the focus on the speed, right? And then the second thing, pay attention, called innovation. So then naturally you had to think about this way. What's the difference between the first one and the second one? If you have to, but it's a very good habit to take a pause to think, because we have tendency to simplify information in order to reduce the load to remember and understand. But one key thing you can understand, summarize will be, this is basically focusing on the speed. This focus on innovation. Innovation you can interpret as something unique or different. But of course, in terms of application, you can find a lot of examples. For example, the UPS, right, FedEx, they are literally competing on speed because that's their business model and focus. And in terms of innovation, very classic example is Apple, right? Apple's focus on innovation. But of course, the natural question will be, how can they apply different direction regarding speed or innovation, and they can both survive. So the one reason because it comes from the position strategy and your customer perception of preference, right? For example, if you are a customer with UPS versus USPS, right, the post office is slower but cheaper. But some customers prefer the speed, then you can get an information delivered faster, right, based on your package, mostly because the small package, therefore are called as information. Apple's example, they focus on uniqueness because their customers prefer those new things, excitement, etc. So therefore, they are less sensitive to the price. It's a very common example, right? But of course, the simple application message will be, if you are choosing a technology as investment, we call this information system or marketing intelligence, you have under this direction, you can choose one of them as your preference or focus. But you have to articulate, of course, right, why you prefer speed over innovation, because that's part of your position and mission statements strategy. And then you begin to move into implication, how I'm going to be able to compete, right, if I focus on speed and focus on innovation. So actually, if you think about a previous example about a Salesforce incentive, under these two directions here, you can also find some fine-tuned way to emphasize, like amplify one of them. For example, if you are wanting to emphasize on speed as competition advantage, this means, in a company level, you are thinking very logically, right? If you focus on the speed, you literally cannot have too many barriers of communication. That means in your organizational structure, you have to reduce this barrier of communication. You have more direct contact with the frontline customer and the employee, because that will help you to achieve this advantage for speed, right? Of course, innovation, you begin to hire different person. The structure is different too. As I mentioned before last time, the Google, right? Google in some way focus on Apple as well, focus on innovation. So therefore, you'll be surprised. I learned this from my classmates before, from a school system. They actually intentionally hire people completely from different major. I'll tell you one example. My classmate, he's a major in philosophy, and he was hired by Google. And Google's reason will be, if I hire everyone from artist field, and I don't have new ideas input, right? Because if they focus on innovation, they intentionally hire people from different discipline. They put you together for launching hang up, because it's through this formal, informal interaction, you are more likely to create more opportunities for innovation purpose. Okay, but of course, naturally, move on here. This is actually very common. You always have to deal with relocation of resources and the budget, right? And the timing is part of resources too, plus the physical equipment, space, money, right? So other things. So this is actually the go down to the implication process. It's actually similar to our students learning too, right? You treat yourself as a small company, and you really have to think about everything. For example, if you are very busy and you maybe want to focus on the speed, right, for you as your preference, right? If you want to focus on the quality, you maybe more emphasis on innovation. Quality in some way indirect related to innovation. But then naturally, when you begin to implement, you have to decide, how much time, budget, support, right, come from you, from your family, and then you also balance your you have to monitor your activity, because some practice habits is very healthy. Some are not. If you take a strategy class or study some management skills books, they give you more insight. So what happens oftentimes, I use the example. One is that we misallocated resources, time. We spend too much time on trivial things. That's one thing. Second thing, some people have this tendency of learning and overcome our tendency. We sometimes tend to be more, so kind of wild, too much thinking or too much doing. Do you see, right? If you are thinking style, you tend to be overthinking. You don't really spend more time, just get things done. Don't think too much. But there's other kind of type of personality. You keep doing, but you don't put too much time to think, right? But that means, you prefer hands-on experience, but very likely you can go to the wrong direction, even though this go back to the effectiveness, efficiency we discussed last time. Because if you are more like doing style, you don't think too much. What if you go to the wrong direction, right? That means the doing more will not help you if you go off the track. Okay. This last one actually is, I'll give you an example. I show you my personal thought. So very good reason example with the online privacy issue. So for example, you probably sounds very familiar, right? California, they passed a law. I just heard the news from NPR this morning. They passed a law regarding the, the customer privacy information online. But that's a law what they passed. Is a very rough draft they mentioned, but they just passed it. So what's the implication? I think this way, even at a personal level, oftentimes things are changing, improving, even based on regulation or moral standard. The best way you have two parallel focus. One will your main focus, keep moving forward. Don't overthinking doing, for instance, Airbnb. Airbnb and also the Uber, right? Uber, when they get started, there's a lot of people have the same ideas. They have so many concerns, but someone began to implement. But of course, something come up later. For example, safety issue, the other issues, and especially safety issue, privacy issue from Airbnb and Uber. So this actually, my thought will be, if you find some good opportunity, you go forward for this, because oftentimes the regulation will come up later. But by the time you already have some advantage over other competitors, because especially some competitors, they don't take action, they just thinking, right? But you already have built up thinking and doing experience. When you begin has new regulations, other things, you just modify, then because that's kind of your second emphasis on as your business model, right? You hire some professional like a lawyer to deal with those regulation issue, or you just modify, because they're not going to ask you to become bankruptcy for your conduct you have done before, because before they don't have such regulations. I just my personal thought, right? Because otherwise you get trapped into this overthinking without any effort into actions. Okay, yeah. Let me see we are okay. We are going to move kind of into this different topic. It's more began to move into the implementation, like a skill set acquiring and training. So how can we do it right? So any questions so far? It's very quiet today. I just want to make sure I don't lose you there. Okay, then we move on here. So it can be simple. I think it's beneficial if I help you to understand how to process information quickly or more accurately. Because some students, I think they didn't get used to the certain language communication method. So that's my role to help you understand a little better. So for example, I highlight here, you understand this way. This actually implies as like a tunnel relationship. You go through this sequence. You start with some potential market, but of course we use available market. That implies there's some difference between potential market and available market. Then we mention target market and the penetration market. So this is also reason indeed we have a lot of terms in this chapter, but it's quite important you notice this kind of pattern, and then you will be able to know how can you pay attention to this. Otherwise, if you take a lot of things for granted, you just keep reading really fast, you don't pay attention to this subtle difference. When we come back to assess you just think they are the same. But of course, naturally, based on this implication, if we list them with different words, it means they are different. But once you pay attention to this pattern, it's not going to be difficult. For example, potential-based means anything can be potential. I used one example to show you, to make it concrete and easy to follow. Just think about this way. If you post one commercial on Craigslist, right, you have a place to rent. And then many people who contact you, you treat them as potential market, or basically means, you based on the website or the media for TV, the range they can reach, that will be potential market. Basically means anyone who have exposure to your commercial, you treat them as potential market. However, the difference about available market will be, the those who meet additional criteria beyond the potential market. For example, they have income, they have interest, they are physically close. Right? For rental property, you have to be physically close. If someone is too far away, it's almost that doesn't disqualify them directly. And target market become a little bit precise because you add additional criteria in order to be qualified as target market. So for example, the target market means, most often time we discuss this way, they also have they have interest and also money. They basically means we talk about the ability and the interest. Because if you don't have money, you have interest, it's not going to qualify you as target market. They help you too, because if you don't pay attention to small things, you are going to not become effective as a salesperson. This reason you either have to ask their income directly or indirectly before you make your sales speech, right, to talk to them. Penetrating market, I want to mention very quickly, but it's quite important because some students get really confused. Penetrating market basically means you are serving the existing customer base, and then of course you maybe wonder, why do we have to introduce these terms? So what's the need to introduce this penetrated market as terms? What happens is that indeed that's one need, because sometimes in terms of marketing strategy, we talked about it before, you don't want to develop a new market, or you don't want to develop a new product either, service. So how can you be able to make more profit? So one way will be because nothing new. The only thing will be just think of structurally, nothing new in terms of new product or new market. Only thing will be what you have so far. And what you have so far is your current market. But how I'm going to make more profit or for other reasons. So this one we introduce is called penetrating market. The simple example will be, for example, you are my current customer for drinking the coffee, right? Go to Starbucks. But you typically only drink 1 cup of coffee per day. But if I'm going to target you, and I will ask you to consume more, right? Maybe 2 cups per day, or I'm going to introduce a modified coffee. Like for instance, something has milk, something combined with some kind of cheese or some other things add on of that. But you are still my current customer, but that's helped me to penetrate the market because I'm going to ask you to consume more. So therefore, I will begin to have more revenue. But that's most of the time is referred to, we just ask you to consume more, increase the frequency, or you began to purchase something from the existing product. But the existing profile modification can be a little bit tricky in terms of definition, because if I introduce something as a modified product, it's still new to you as existing customer. Precisely should be considered as a new product. But overall, this idea will be pay attention to understand why we have to introduce the penetration to market concept and exactly the scenarios we can apply that. Otherwise some students will feel very confused to understand this concept. Okay, then we move on to this thing. So this one just simple. I just wanted to make sure everyone can follow here. So this is a very common way, they call it 90 types of demand. Briefly means you want to make sure where do we get this 90 numbers, right? So now come from here, this because it's come from 3 dimension. So this from the space level, 3 factors, right? One is the space level, and one product level, one has time level. But because each one has, for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 under each level a factor, right? Then this will be, maybe I write down this way here. I have 5 from space level, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6, and then I have 1, 2, 3. So this reason we have 90s, right? 5, 6, 30, right? This 30, and 30 multiplied by 3 will be 90 types of demand. So this is a very common way mathematically they will tell us how many combinations do we have. But of course, in practice, when we begin to apply, we will use these 90 numbers to against the reality. But not everything makes sense, right? Based on your business, based on reality check. So you will take out the sum of the numbers here. That will be you narrow types of demand to consider. But I just want to make sure otherwise partial reason because some students began to take the Google Analytics certificate training. One important skill set will be oftentimes the work will begin to switch between human to human communication to human and machine communication. So the machine cannot ask for clarification. Machine most of the time just take your order. For instance, you have to tell them exactly how many types. You need to understand, how can you get this number, and if you check with reality, what remaining numbers types will be available there. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to make sure. Otherwise, sometimes we feel, we understand somewhere, but not very clearly or thoroughly. Okay, so that's one example mentioned. Second one, we introduce this demand measurement vocabulary. So idea, I want to briefly go over these two examples here. So they just kind of introduce the tools as one purpose. Second purpose is to make sure we understand how to read them. So for example, they show you as two examples here, one based on function of industry marketing expectation, right? They assume a particular marketing environment. There's another one will be two different environment assumed. That means this one just add another one. But pay attention here, they divide into two different things. They based on the minimum and the forecast and the potential. So this actually matches the previous one we discussed before, potential market, available market, etc. Very good way to put into context. Think about this yourself. Oftentimes, your supervisor going to ask you to do a marketing research about a new product idea or something existing. So they are asking to give you a report. So this is one of the typical patterns they are asking for, because fundamentally we want to know how can we survive. And then we have ideal situation, neutral risk situation, and then the minimum surviving situation. So very similar to if you have been working in the banking system, insurance system, we use a lot of information factors to classify into different conditions. Oftentimes, we based on the uncertainty or risk factors. The neutral level means no, we are neutral, not very risky, but not too conservative. Another one will be very risky, high uncertainty, maybe potentially has high profit, return on investment. And then the minimum level will be what's the minimum bar, right? The break-even point for us to break even. For that means we don't lose, we don't win. At least we can survive. So it's a very common way you classify report this way. The good news, of course, in the future, the data, the machine learning going to help us to prepare such a report for us, right? But we don't cover at a more advanced level. I'm teaching similar concept in another class. That's more about programming, computer science direction. So, but at conceptual level, they share very good similarity. Now go over this example here. Now combine with another example I showed before to help you see a little bit complex example. So this actually they convert into two environmental settings. So one is during recession, one during the prosperity, right? So I threw into this idea, you think about this way. But oftentimes, those environmental factors we cannot have control over this. It's basically like human reaction too. We cannot control the environmental factor. However, we can survive better based on our coping strategy. So one example will be, for example, they mentioned that if we introduce this technology or the political environment as additional factor to consider, there's some people studied this. They didn't mention that, for example, what kind of company can survive better under these two environmental conditions. And they did for very simple logic. It may not be true. Typically, think about this way: if you are working for a big company because of bigger size and bureaucracy, the structure, so many layers of communication, they tend to survive better in a stable environmental setting. Small company tend to survive better in a turbulence. Turbulence means you have a lot of changes, uncertainty. This, of course, is a very simplified example, but you will be able to apply, right, by introduce some thinking, some other factor to practice here. Because it's going to help you, because especially some of us, if you are young, you are going to interview with a lot of different companies, but you have to make a good sense to yourself which company is better for you for your future. You don't want to join some company is very on this prosperity path before you join them, and after you join them, they become bankruptcy 5 years later. Right. One reason I learned this lesson is very, very hard to explain to people why something goes wrong. Because people have a tendency, they don't have patience to listen to your explanation, even though you need to tell the truth. A lot of people make some judgment based on the outcome, even though it's not your fault. So what you can do then, right? You study, you learn, you think, and you protect yourself, because you don't have to explain to them if you are on a good career choice, career path. So I think that's the one advantage you have, right? So basically means now we indeed can learn by thinking, by studying. You can apply at different scenarios, right? This is still beneficial, I would put this way. I personally feel I tended to be very too nice before. Now I began to think strategically. I can still be a very nice person. I just feel based on this knowledge I'm learning, I'm studying, I can make better decisions for my future almost on a daily basis, because we have some theory to guide us, some practice to guide us. Otherwise that means I began to have less. Basically means I regret much less, because I began better to make judgment decision. But something happened to others. Just in terms of if they want to listen, I will tell them why. If not, right, that's business. That's the business. They don't want to listen to me. If they want, I will tell them as a suggestion. Okay. Yeah. Sorry I put it this way, but indeed you think the similar way. You can apply the similar way too. Next few things in some way just tell you some toolbox, right? Because of course one reason you may ask, why do we have to have so many different vocabularies? So once again, because they are serving for different needs. So for example, market share. Market share is one business focus, especially those low profit, right? Low profit, for example, shampoo, convenience store. They were running business based on the business model. It's very, very slow margin for making profit. So they are focused mostly on market share. Because they are competing at a different model, different mindset. So what happened, for example, like a Walmart with other competitors. So they can try to concur with higher market share, but once you cannot compete anymore, then some small business they cannot survive. They will be out of business. So after this, they began to be able to make more profit. That means the first stage is on market share. And then they drive those competitors out of business. And then they began to recruit this strategy by making more profit, because they are going to be able to increase the price. Right? When you increase price, your profit margin began to increase. But before you can do that, you have to focus on market share in order to drive your competitors out of business first. That's the kind of one purpose here. Another one called is how can you measure, right? The uses market penetration. So this reason you see we use this concept here, penetration, the terms we introduced before. Another one called share penetration. So index, put this way, very simple mathematically. A lot of things you guys can tell. We use some very basic mathematical calculations, mostly just based on the ratio, right? You have some combination. So they compare. So for instance, if I put this market penetration here, that means the market go first, right? penetration go next, then we have the ratio as index. This is the second thing, the same thing. So because you will see similar terminology very often, but the sequence, it matters. That means that not randomly, you cannot put the numbers randomly before or after. You have to pay attention to the sequence or order because the meaning is different otherwise. Okay. Then we also have some other things, forecast, potential, demand, sales forecast, sales potential. Once again, they share a lot of similarity, but they are focused on different purpose, different levels, right? So for example, company demand at a higher level, sales forecast, because oftentimes under one company, you have different product line. So each sales force, they have different forecasts, and they also have different potentials, right? Just for different purpose. I would say the forecast mostly based on the past information to predict the future forecast. Potential, maybe you will consider some current or predicted change. You estimate the potentials, right? Of course, there are some overlap between the two, but the idea is to introduce you some tools you can use for application practice, application purpose. Then we mentioned this another example. Actually, I will put this way: if you are not have enough running business experience, we don't have habit to apply this way. But once you get this, introduce this experience, you can apply in many settings, including your daily life, I would say. Because some people will just more like informally for training purpose, but this one show you more scientifically, but it's not a very complex. See this because it's different, right? We combine all the concepts we discussed before. We do this calculation to get this demand estimation here. So for instance, here, if you are a salesperson in the Raleigh area here, right? You first need to collect information. Remember this whole module about the capture information, right? You need to collect information about this population here. And under this population, you need to know their income, and you understand this definition, description of income, right? Describe means you take after you some cost, how much flexible income you have. Then you base on the percentage you spend on food, and this tell you now why you have to need to know information. Then the information based on beverage and the alcohol. Basically means they are under each category, subcategory, and you narrow down to those persons who are more likely to be your target market. Because here it implies, you are selling the beers, right? But you have to get all the information from this chain link, right? In order to get this ratio method to do a estimation here. Okay, it's not very complex. I think it's useful as well. For me, especially, I think I apply this way in terms of do the planning and also think about the competition. For example, if you get this information and you think about how many people in the market are competing with you, then you can go back to decide which strategy you are going to use. Do you follow me, right? This was based on estimation. Base means your competitors are going to do the same thing. But in terms of pie, right, base means how many people are sharing during competition. Think about this way. Okay, I'm sorry, I draw this way. This pie, right? If you only have like 3 or 4 competing, you get a very good sense. Competition is lower, level is lower. However, everyone gets this information, and then you have more competitors, right? It's going to affect you about your competition strategy, because the competition is much higher if you have more competitors, right? Because I think here basically we are doing this estimation at a whole industry sector level, because that means we are trying to estimate everyone gets this same information, but the competition factor will affect change our position strategy for that. Okay, then we have other things. We have this other method here, build-up method, also multiple factor method. So there's some difference. I think a simple way to understand is that how much information effort do you have or do you want? So simple logic will be, for example, multiple factors, is very likely because it's very hard for you to have all the information you need in order to have very precise estimation about demand. So therefore, sometimes they use multiple factors. Another reason will be one factor in terms of statistical sense or correlation sense. One factor has some overlap with another factor. So it's very hard for us to partial out, right? How one factor contribute to what a percentage for the demand, because there's some overlap. So therefore, very common they use this multiple factors method. On the other hand, if you have all the precise information or you prefer this way, basically once again go back to narrow down to the issue, do you have a complete information or incomplete information? How much effort is going to take you to get all the information? This is a very key method when you do the case studies later. So then you can decide which method you can use to estimate. Okay. So maybe I illustrate a little bit briefly here. For example, I show you here because later we may use this thinking very often. It's very simple, right? If you think this information as a percentage level, now if you have all the information you have, and this means you can choose some estimation method because you can predict very accurately. You don't need to use multiple factors because you have every information you need. You will be very precise. But oftentimes what happens, you have this kind of information, the rest will be 1 minus x, right? This mathematically you interpret this way. But when you have this information unknown, you have two options. One option is to put an additional effort to have such information, but it's going to cost you, right? It's going to cost you have such information. Another option will be, what if I just don't want to know this information? I'm just going to take a guess based on probability, right? We call it probability. So that means I will choose this approach because this approach is too costly than taking a guess, right? This is very common in reality, right? It's too costly to collect information versus compare to take a guess. Another one, just almost impossible to get the information. Right? For example, in medical field, sometimes they need enough patient to as a sample for study, but they just cannot reach those people. So therefore, the cost actually was not a big concern. The problem is those information just not available, right? So therefore, you make a choice between these two. It's very common in case study for learning and teaching and also in reality. So you make a choice and decide going to say, okay, I'm going to choose which one of these. But this is more common in reality. Then you will see, how much risk I'm going to take. But of course, when under this setting, you go back to consider this ratio between x and man, do this ratio, right? So this means if this ratio is smaller, for instance, less than 50%, right? This is going to tell you how much confidence you have, which means the more information you have, the better confidence you have, the less risky you are taking. However, if this number is too high, 1 minus x, right? You have to choose, as I showed you because before, right? You have different risk factors, right? This is called risk factor. Maybe use my hand here. You have risk factors. You will see high risk approach, neutral risk approach, or low risk approach. This means we have three kind of coping strategy based on the risk factors as consideration, right? But it's common sense. But the good news is oftentimes we summarize as a pattern, we study as apply as a systematic manner. So that's help us to do that. So that's another example to show you this called brand development index as illustration. For example, here they mention, you'll apply this very often. For example, oftentimes we have information from A and B as raw information from the internal records. Remember we talked about it before, right? From this MRS system, you have internal information. However, you don't have this information ready because you have to use this A and B to process, convert into this index. So this reason now oftentimes if you are doing a task, right, in business or for case study, oftentimes you have A and B, but you don't have this BDR because we are looking for you to convert such information into a ratio. And after you have this ratio, you do the sorting, then you begin to pay attention to this index direction. Because here we are talking about the brand sale divided by the category sale. So that means now the higher the number, the better, because we pay attention to the sequence or the order. So you do the sorting of this. So that's help you to display the information is a very, very user-friendly manner, right? So of course, you will see much more examples if you change the title into, for instance, the performance index, sales number index, revenue index, because they have different purpose meaning. Because sometimes, oh, what's happening here? Okay, so let's just give you some illustration. But the idea is that this tool set you can create something by yourself for different purpose. But the purpose is here to introduce you. It's a very common tool set and measurement method, and it's not very difficult to understand, apply at all. Okay, then we just give you some additional examples in terms of sales and market share. I want to mention briefly, I use a different example. I don't know what's this happening here. Okay, briefly introduce a different example in just make you a little more excited. So what happened recently is they began to use artificial intelligence to estimate this, for instance, the housing market. So they use past data. I don't know how many of you purchased house before. Have you decided what's the best offer you should give to the seller? So actually, oftentimes we are doing similar way, but not very scientifically close to here. But I think we are very similar. For example, when I bought my house, I will create an Excel file. I go to Zillow or Redfin. I will enter search information similar to the house size, location, income level, the bedroom, number of bedroom, and bathroom, and the size of the yard, the year the house is built. Because later we are doing this, and then we create a very similar to this regression analysis, and we kind of estimate the final dependent variable will be the price per square feet, right? But of course, now you have to use the either mathematical way or your human judgment to adjust the score, right? Because what happens sometimes based on the competition, how many people are competing with you, how urgent, do you need to buy a place and move in, the time you can move in, how much repairs you need to do, those kind of things. But the idea will be they share some similarity. Nowadays, including marketings in particular, we began to move into a lot of things. We use artificial intelligence to help us do this kind of work. And we don't do it manually by human anymore. We kind of intervene, but we began to combine with artificial intelligence to process and collect such information. Okay. I think let's just introduce finish all the discussion for this chapter. Yeah, thank you for your patience. I think we already passed the 9 o'clock. So any other questions, comments? Yeah, we still have 80 students here. So overall summarize here again, this is relatively easy chapter, but still you can understand, you'll be able to apply. One reason I actually like this kind of topic more, because you are thinking a lot of things at a very broad level. So broad level because apply in many settings, but it's very difficult to articulate very well. For example, if you tell other people you are MBA students on the street, very quickly people are going to throw out some question at this broad level. They will test you, or sometimes they are really looking for answers. You have to think about quickly how are you going to answer them, and also convince them it's worth your training to take an MBA class and then compare with someone on the street. I'm sorry using this term, but you all see such an example very often. So in some way, it's more like a test. You have to show some difference, compared to their information processing process and quality, right? So I think you hope you can get something out of this, yeah. And do you guys want to spend some time to go over some questions in the study guide, or do you want to come back at a later time? Yeah, it's very quiet. I needed to see responses here. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you, Rashid's responses. Okay, if no other preference, we can go over next time. I know it's very difficult to get up in the next day to work at a full time and then still be able to concentrate in the evening. I think how about this way, yeah, we can come back next time because you maybe take time to digest better. Then we can come back to go over some questions if needed. Okay. So once again, pay attention. I will quickly process the quiz 1 and then open the quiz 2. So to help you to to have something to do, help you and manage the class very well. Okay, just pay attention to the posting updates at the course website. Okay. Okay, if no other questions, now thank you for your attendance participation. Have a good evening.